Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. Can you see my screen? Slide showing. Great.
Yes.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today with special guests from all over the world. We have Steve from BugHerd all the way from Melbourne. Hi, Steve.
Good morning. Well, morning for me anyway.
Yeah. And good afternoon to Nick from Promethean Research in Ohio, right?
Exactly.
Nice. Today we're going to talk about some of the most recent trends within web development and design. And but first, let me just introduce our lovely guests a little bit more. First of all, I'm Maria, and we welcome you from Productive. Our team builds a platform for agencies, and this is how this partnership came to be. About 1/3 of all the agencies that use Productive are web dev and design agencies, sorry. And actually the platform was born out of the needs of a now 370 person development and design agency. So that's enough from my side. I wanted to introduce you to our speakers here today, Nick and Steve. For those of you who haven't heard about them or seen them around the internet, Nick from Promethean Research, he's helped so many agencies worldwide with his research, with his work. He's published he publishes dozens of reports per year, and that's included over 45,000 agencies. I don't even know where you find all these agencies to work with. Before he used to work on Wall Street, and he started his consulting business focused on digital agencies. Years ago. He's already helped more than 100 agencies worldwide, and yeah, it's great working with him. On the other side, Steve, he really knows this business because he had his own agency, and now he runs the world's #1 website QA platform, BugHerd, in case you haven't seen on his shirt. So Steve has over 20 years of marketing and technology leadership experience, including that of his own agency. So he really knows this space well. And with that, I'll let you guys both start talking about what we've recently, well, what Nick primarily has recently found out and the comments that we have.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Maria. Let me get my screen shared. Place that with screen 1. Share. Okay. So I'm Nick from Promethean. Thanks again, Maria and Steve, for having me here. This is a pretty interesting topic, and I think there's a lot to learn in this space. Before jumping in, though, I do want to give a bit of context to this research. So a few months ago, we surveyed over 100 agency leaders, developers, and designers. We wanted to know what their web dev process was and how it's evolved recently. It seems like there's been, a lot of changes, and we wanted to get some actual data to back up what we're hearing about out there. So that's basically what turned into this. So first up, we wanted to know where they were doing their work. As we learned in previous surveys, developers and designers use multiple tools throughout their workflow. But for this study, we really wanted to understand where the bulk of the work was being done. So this chart just shows the results of where they're doing their design work. Figma was by far one of the most popular responses, or the most popular response, with Illustrator coming in, a really distant second. Anything jump out to you, Steve, with this?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it's pretty obvious that the shift to Figma is very real, and that's a conversation that we have with our customers all the time when we're kind of talking about what their tools they're using in the design process. So it's interesting that the demise of InVision and how that's kind of also really shifted in. But Figma's killer feature, I think, that accelerated that growth was bringing designers and developers closer together. So things like dev mode made it easier for the devs to see dimensions of things and work that do the handover through to designers, through to developers. Obviously, Adobe's failed acquisition, I think, gave it another little rocket ship and put them on the road, put them on people's roadmap as well. So, yeah, I don't see that changing anytime soon. And I think we've got some stuff to talk about AI as well, but their movement into that will accelerate uptake as well. But the more traditional ones, Illustrator, Photoshop, we still see there, have a very solid presence as well. So,
oh, absolutely. And people seem to really like Figma too. Like, it's not just like they're doing work there and they don't enjoy it. That's a space where they really seem to love to work in. So we also wanted to know where devs were spending their time. VS Code obviously came out as by far the clear winner here when it came to text editors for developers, with 70% citing it as their editor of choice. And then Sublime Text was a distant second place with only 14%. Everyone else, though, like, this chart was a little longer. We cut this because there were like single answers and 2 answers to some of these. It's just I don't know. People, the web devs seem to really enjoy VS Code, or I hope they do. They spend a lot of time there.
Free, open source, extremely highly extensible, set of ecosystem of packages and plugins. It's a recipe for success in a lot of places. I'm very interested to see how this shifts. There's new entrants like Cursor.ai. Obviously, VS Code is integrated quite a bit with Copilot, but Cursor.ai is something that we're seeing in our team. A few people kind of playing around with and quite enjoying. So, watch this space. But beating the ecosystem behind something as established as VS Code is quite difficult.
Definitely. It's good there's choice out there, though. I mean, like, that's kind of both a blessing and a curse. I remember how long I spent setting up different text editors and then jumping to new ones. So it works both ways, I guess. Key trend categories. So here we asked about what are the key trends that are actually impacting the web dev work you do today. Respondents showed a really strong focus on AI and automation, and they were easily the most common trend cited. Many respondents reported that adopting AI tools had significantly increased efficiency and productivity. Tasks are being completed faster with greater ease, but these gains, they're not going unnoticed by clients. And AI is impacting, the web dev design work really by shifting a lot of client expectations around development speed, project timing, and pricing. And then the second piece was, the amount of non-tech trends that are really impacting web dev work. Things like sales and business challenges, market shifts, and economic factors are all having an impact. So you have these like traditional kind of tech forces at play that are also meeting these like extra pressures from kind of a weird economic environment. Tech's been strange for 2 years now almost. Are you kind of seeing that similar thing play out, Steve, or is this new?
Yes, I mean, I think AI and automation, if you were to ask anybody in the world the things that are impacting their category the most, that you're going to get that as number one. So looking beyond that, as you said, the sales and business challenges, client economic shifts, they're the things that agencies have to deal with every day to survive. They're not new, and I do think it's been a very tough market over the last couple of years. We're hoping to see that bounce back. I think everybody on this call and all of us in as well. So but at the end of the day, these AI and automation is not going anywhere. I'm also very interested in the downward pressure it puts on pricing, in a sense, because there's a push there from clients, I think, to say, hey, get more done with less. Now you have kind of these AI and automation tools. Does that put a downward pressure on an agency's ability to charge effectively, and how they handle that? Go about charging for outputs more than kind of time and materials or things. I don't know what exactly the future holds there, but it's a very interesting area.
Yeah, clients faster, cheaper, right? Like that's what they push for. They want it yesterday, and they want it for very little. I don't think that will ever change, but maybe their expectations around is that possible can change a little bit.
Yeah, there's an education piece there, I think, as well, which we can touch on a little bit.
For sure. Okay, so the top line takeaway, obviously, like AI is having this huge impact. We also wanted to know exactly where, though. how are people actually using it? So we asked, what dev tasks are you actually using AI for? And half the respondents said they're using it for code generation. Interestingly, though, almost all the other dev tasks, or like traditionally dev tasks, had low AI adoption rates. And I wanted to ask, like, why do you think this is? Like, is it tool maturity? Is it like building it into workflow is more difficult? Like, what is it, the value that you get out of it?
It could just be time and kind of practice with certain things. And again, going back to something like Cursor AI, so Copilot, for instance, built into VS Code, looks at kind of things in much smaller context. Whereas if you look at a tool like Cursor, it looks at the entire code base, so it has much more context when it's providing answers. And I think then it's easier to kind of do other things just than kind of single line or single function code generation. I'm actually very interested in the second response there, the people that aren't using AI yet. And I've had conversations certainly in our team over the last couple of years, and some resistance towards some of these tools. And I think again, it's important to understand. There's a couple of points in this, I guess. Like understand, like we value. So I value output, not So if people feel
Right.
how to say it, like a not wanting to go into something because they're worried about diminishing their own quality or something like that, it's like, okay, but if we can also make us faster and get us to better outputs quickly, it's worth pursuing for sure. But that's an interesting one, and I think also for organizations, there's a lot of training within the businesses about how to use these AI tools effectively. IP issues, having policies around them. We actually did a webinar a couple of weeks ago with someone on that exact topic. So if anyone really wants to kind of dig into that and how to handle those policies, then check that out as well. But I do think it's going to redefine what these roles are like, and this is true for all of them, and also what it means for a junior coming into the space. How they have to learn, because you still need domain knowledge, and how do you learn that domain knowledge if a lot of the doing is not the same as it used to be? And that's I don't think anyone has the exact answer for that yet.
You think anybody's holding out and marketing it as handcrafted websites and no AI?
But I guess that's the other thing in terms of how you and particularly we'll talk about the design one in a moment. So maybe I'll save that point for that one.
Actually, segue. Thank you. Next up is design tasks. So this is the same question, but for designers, and we've found that most popular use case, other than none, is actually in image editing and enhancement. There's that huge difference in what this chart looks like versus what the dev tasks one looks like. Like 41% of designers, a space where I thought personally that using it to create just like assets or background images, illustrated images, that kind of thing, even as like a starting point, seemed to me, to my non-designer understanding, seemed like a place where this could work. But apparently it's not caught on yet.
Yeah, so I went and chatted to our designers specifically about this, because I did find it interesting as well, and particularly the difference. And his perspective, I guess, was that AI adoption in design is a bit slower, partly because the tooling is not quite as advanced. So, Copilot again in VS Code has been there for a long time. Figma, for instance, they're all using Figma. The kind of AI components to that are not quite as advanced necessarily. Was his perspective. I also think maybe that the client is less accepting potentially of AI in like end work. If it's in code generation, everybody's oh yeah, cool, it's in the code. Yeah. But if it's hey, here is our design work and this has been partially AI generated, there's a whole bunch of other things from the client perspective, I think, that come into that, as I said, like copyright and IP, and and so again, those policies we touched on, or just being very overt that we are using those, but and AI has been used in the research. But I think that's where his perspective, our designer, was around, using it a lot for research, a lot of kind of visual things. But something like Midjourney is not going to give you the end output at this point in time. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm glad you looked into it, because I had a different thought on it. Okay, let's get into the site builds. So this is a heat map showing the average number of websites, mobile apps, and web apps that agencies are building each year. The darker the color, the more responses. And most agencies, what we found was most agencies, 85%, are building fewer than 25 websites a year for clients. And then web apps make up a smaller portion of the builds, still kind of all around there. And then mobile apps are a real tiny fraction of annual projects. And when we were chatting about this earlier in the preliminary stuff, you brought up, like, is this a function of who we surveyed? And I went back and I looked through and looked at the types of services that the people provided who participated in this survey. What did they provide, like mobile dev work, or was that not on their website? And there was a pretty standard mix of mobile devs, web devs, and I guess web apps and websites fall under web dev. But there wasn't anything kind of crazy outlying. And I really think it comes down to like a general shift in the marketplace and in a little bit of demand over the last few years. I don't think mobile apps are as needed, maybe, but I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but like they're not as demanded by end clients as they may have been in like 2021, 2022.
Yeah, that's very interesting to me too. I wouldn't have thought that. I looked at our data as well.
Yeah.
We certainly see on our side, so a similar number. We, in terms of average, we look at projects per year, and a project generator relates to I guess a website in a way. But ours is very heavily impacted by team size. So as the team size gets larger, that number climbs quite dramatically. So yeah, that it was interesting to me that from what you said in terms of there was no real change in team size. I do think moving a lot of the discussion we have with people as well is that the actual build of the website, particularly at the smaller agency side, is not necessarily where the money is made. Like that may be an opportunity to kind of get a client, but that predictable long-term revenue is actually built off then selling other services into that client. So whether that's SEO or content creation, site maintenance, things like that. But so that it may be that actually we're doing less website build work, but we're just actually trying to get those maintain that client so we can sell in other services over time.
Gotcha. Interesting. Thanks for looking into that. That's helpful.
All
right. Next up is CMS usage, and kind of as expected, WordPress was the most commonly used CMS in our survey, with 83% of the respondents saying they use it currently. It also had by far the highest favorability rating in our sentiment analysis. Interestingly, interestingly to me, I guess this is why I was doing the survey, because I wasn't up on this as much, but both Joomla and Drupal seem to be falling out of favor. 37% and 36% of respondents said they no longer use them, respectively. And they're currently really only used by a very small portion of respondents. I don't know what their kind of market share at their peak ever was, but it does seem like at least in my clients and in the research work that I do, I see them really used in those kind of like complex, like massive higher education build outs and medical build outs and those kind of things. And maybe that's just less work coming in from those guys. I don't know. I'd love to get your thoughts on this.
Yeah, just to kind of go back a moment to the WordPress one, I think very similarly there to the VS Code. It's free, open source, very highly extensible. A lot of packages for it. So the ecosystem that supports WordPress is unrivaled, and one of the reasons that it's as popular as it is. I mean, WooCommerce, which is number 2 there, is obviously a package for WordPress. We can't talk about WordPress without quickly mentioning that they're having some challenges slightly.
Rough patch, right? Rough patch.
Yeah. So
I'm not jumping into that. That's
we do
this
have
is
a
all
Q&A
you, buddy.
question on that, which will be interesting as well. But maybe we'll kind of tackle that a little bit later. Sure. I do think it's interesting. No code, kind of low code tools like Webflow are really gaining ground, and so it'll be interesting to see kind of that space over time. We certainly moved as a team from WordPress into, we use Webflow now, mainly because the designer handles everything all the way through, so it doesn't touch the development team at all, and that was very easy. And we wouldn't have been able to do that. I mean, we may have been, but ironically, we were on WordPress hosted on WP Engine, so, but we
love
it. Previously, but we found Webflow to be much. It kind of gives that it can sit within the design now for. But all we're talking about is marketing and landing pages, right? Nothing more complex than that. So, interesting. But yes, certainly your Drupals of the world are slowing down. Do you have a question about percentages here? So this is a multi-response.
Yes.
Question.
Yeah. It's which one do you use currently? So like they were allowed to pick. I don't know. I don't know what the average number of selections was. I want to say it was like 2 or 3, but I don't remember.
Excellent.
All right. Thank you for segueing right into the site builders. In addition to CMS usage, we wanted to get a better, more granular, really, idea on the low-code, no-code site builder usage. Almost half of our respondents have tried Webflow or Squarespace, and everyone has heard of Webflow. This is a relatively crowded market. About half of the list that we displayed to the survey respondents, was unknown to a large portion of them. So it's a big fragmented market.
Yeah. So I mean, from our perspective, it's very similar to the previous one, but it shows you that I think the impact that Webflow have had in a relatively short period of time, I guess, comparatively to WordPress, the same as the Squarespace. But while people are trying things, the previous slide says that they're still settling back into that amazing ecosystem that WordPress provides.
Oh, yeah. So, it's hard to beat.
I would be, it'll be interesting to kind of fast forward this, 5 years and see whether those numbers hold. So,
I'm down to do the research again. I'll hold you to that. Next up was what they liked about these low code, no code site builders. So, beyond just like, do you use it? We really wanted insights into the actual features that made them enjoy it. Like you mentioned that designers can own it was one of your big drivers of why you switched. Again, we found Webflow obviously was the most liked site builder when we did the sentiment analysis. And then when we asked about features that are keeping people or are interesting people to site builders, really it was the faster and cheaper. Like just what we said, you said at the top of the webinar about clients having those kind of demands and reiterating those demands. They're showing up in why people are choosing these things, because they're just able to deliver, close to those client expectations more easily.
Yeah, or margin, right? It's one of those two things.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're charging on a kind of fixed thing, the faster you can get it done, the more, the kind of better the margin is in there. So yeah, but as I said, from our perspective, it was certainly that the designer owning it end to end gave us a really big reason to shift.
What I guess let's I don't know. I'm just curious. What about designers owning it made that so attractive?
I mean, I think even with WordPress, the designer is able to own it. Again, there's a lot of packages there and things like that. I think for Webflow, it just became a bit faster, and particularly the hosting side of it. So there was no need for us to kind of set up or manage any of the kind of complicated hosting stuff that we were handling before to make it as performant as possible. Webflow obfuscates that away and just does it for us. I'm not recommending one over the other. This is very useful for our particular use case. That's all.
You are a segue machine. It's like we practiced this, because next we're getting into hosting. So we wanted to know what their favorite hosting companies were. We got a lot of responses to this, 31 different responses when we asked about their favorite hosting company. These are just the top 10, and WP Engine came out on top with DigitalOcean and AWS slightly behind. And this really illustrates like the wide selection and the market fragmentation for hosting companies. Everyone really seems to have their own preferences, and I couldn't pick out like an absolute clear winner here.
Half of one, half of the other, half doesn't.
Right.
whatever the phrase is. It's pretty hard to separate yourself as a hosting provider on different features. Again, it would be very interesting to see, because, and there is a question for Emily around the conflict between automatic and WP engine.
Right.
I'm not, I, again, don't have a foot in either camp of that, but it will be, it'll be very interesting to see the impact that has on both of those parties. It's yet to be resolved, and obviously there's, it's going to court and things like that. But it will be, that's very much a kind of watch. Yeah.
Oh, I know.
Watch this space, and particularly when you have, as I said, in both of these questions, they are the leading provider in that ecosystem. So it'll be a challenging one, I think, to overcome.
Well, I think that's why it's on everybody's mind. A lot of the owners, I'm seeing more chatter around that in various Slack groups for agency owners than I have in anything in a while. Like, people are legit concerned about it because these are two behemoths in their relative spaces. It's one of those things where small things, like things that should be small things, getting blown out of proportion can have a massive impact on a lot of people that aren't even near those platforms just because of movement around them. So it is one to watch for sure.
Yeah, definitely. One thing that interests me in hosting is around how whether people, that's in from an agency perspective, whether that's packaged up in and kind of sold, as a service, and again talking to kind of where those margin things are. So you may do the development as a lower cost, but then it's like the hosting is an ongoing thing that that where I guess margin is added.
Well, with that, let's talk about hosting decisions and who makes them, because I think that directly relates to kind of where it's hosted. We asked, because it is such a big decision, we wanted to better understand how it's made. And what we found was that most of the time, the client will choose where to host the project with guidance from the agency. But it wasn't dramatically more. Like, joint decisions in general are more common than only agency or only client. But really the big takeaway here is there isn't a clear cut, this is how you do it answer. It's really a project by project, client by client thing.
Yeah, certainly. And agencies, they kind of, for this, there's a very broad range of choices, right? So it tends to be either client led or agency led primarily. But yeah, not much to other than what it says on the tin.
All right. Well, with that, we're going to bring Maria back in here for the key takeaways, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Nick. Yeah, I'm gonna share the screen again. Now, most famous question since 2020. Can you see my screen?
Good to go.
Yeah. So, 3 key takeaways that we've prepared kind of from this whole discussion. AI is definitely top of mind for most web dev agencies, but there's a lot to go. There's a lot further to go, and we're using it, but not all of us are using it, and that's something to still explore. Clients are actually really expecting AI efficiencies and more benefits before the industry has been even able to achieve these. I think what happened when everything was kind of launching full force is that people were so obsessed with figuring out how to be most efficient and how to get the most out of it. But then, of course, like, just by exploring, a lot of time is lost, or maybe some still haven't been able to, like, for example, the designers you mentioned. Designers are having a hard time, right, with using AI to its furthest. And the third key takeaway is, like, most digital agencies are building fewer than 25 sites per year, but they're opting to increase project complexity versus deliver more sites as they grow. If you have any final comments to add to this, Nick or Steve, feel free to. If not, we'll head to the Q&A because we had a couple of questions.
Well, I'm ready to jump into Q&A. That's right. I love that.
Shoot. Well, we have a question here. Hold on a second. I just misplaced my Q&A. Here it is. With the conflict between Automatic and the WordPress engine over the last few weeks, do you foresee any changes to the WordPress ecosystem?
Thanks for starting with a softball. I really appreciate that. Jeez. Short answer, yes. From what I'm hearing, like hosting was one of those things where agency leaders and the DevOps people that were working with it really wanted it to be solid. Like they wanted this to not be a thing that they really had to think about. And any kind of turbulence in that space that makes them, and even worse, their clients think about this and worry, like, is this a problem? Like me, Mr. Brand, is this a problem for me? And I'm going to go yell at my agency about it or yell at my developer about it. Like they don't want to deal with that. So I think, yes, this will cause changes. What those are, I'm not going to pontificate on. Like I can't. That's beyond my pay grade.
Yeah, I agree. There's certainly some short-term upheaval, but in terms of what that means in the long run, I think there is a fairly serious kind of court case that will determine that.
Yeah.
There's quite a bit at stake for the entire ecosystem around WordPress in that court case, and so wait and see, because until the kind of dust settles of that, it's impossible to. It really depends on which way that leans, or whether they settle and all calm down, which doesn't look likely at this point in time.
No. Thanks, Emily. Hope we've answered your question.
Thanks, Emily.
You mentioned 100 different responders to surveys. Were those from 100 different agencies, or were they multiple people from the same agency in some instances?
In a few instances, it was multiple people within the same agency, but that was pretty rare. I would have liked more of that, but we really got a pretty well distributed kind of survey panel on it. There were, what do we have? We had 116 total responses, and the ones that came, multiple ones from the same place, may have only accounted for, say, 6 to 10 of those in total.
Cool.
In terms of spread of agency sizes, I think.
Yeah. So I do a lot of work around making sure that I understand what the curve, what the distribution of agencies looks like, just overall in the world. One of the reasons I do that is so that I can look at the curve of each of our survey responses and see, does it skew one way? Does it skew the other way? Are we talking about larger agencies or smaller agencies than average? Here, this curve fit very well. It may have skewed slightly smaller, but not much at all. Not that I would make of note. What we have, we had 28% were single person shops. Another 20, it's almost all quarters. 27% was 1 to 9 employees. 25% was 10 to 24 employees. And then another 20% was 25 employees or more. So as the whole, the market skews small anyway. Like for a lot of our work, we cut off that really giant tail of single person shops. But this thing fits right in with that too.
Sure. Why do you think a lot of designers are not using AI assistants? You've touched upon that already, but I think it's really fascinating how far the dev end has come, and then the design. Even at our company at Productive, like sometimes I'll be like, "Hey designers, did you try just like whipping up a simple image with an AI tool?" And they're like, just use that here and there for some ideas, but like really it's not.
Is that because marketing's asking for that asset last minute?
No.
No, that doesn't happen.
No. I just wonder.
Okay.
Just because the whole hype is there, right?
Right. Steve, I'm gonna let you take that one. You know way more about that than I do.
Yeah, I think again, it's one of those. This is changing so rapidly, and going back to the kind of VS Code integration with
Mhm.
Copilot and how kind of that is built into someone's workflow very effectively. I don't think that has been there yet for designers, and so once Figma does have kind of AI built into it, but once that gets to the level that it's it's people understand that I can do my job with this effectively. I think, and which is kind of getting there now. It's just been a bit behind the kind of LLM version of that, so the text version of that. Over the next few years, I expect you would see that number change very, very quickly. As is that Figma is the main tool of use, and so if you can do UI UX very quickly using AI in Figma, it's going to be it's going to speed up your workflow, in which case people will pick it up a lot quicker. There is always a little bit of pride that goes into this as well, though. So that shift of, oh, hang on, it's not maybe as good as my output. It takes people, and as it did for code, it takes people a little bit to get over that as well.
I think there's another one. I mean, I think you touched upon this at the very beginning, Steve, but like, there was a comment about like, are we all, that the market is quite difficult and it has been in the past few years, and are we all struggling, or is this something that only some of us are going through?
Certainly from our perspective, I mean, there's always in any market there are winners and losers, but if we broadly, I would say, look at ad spend as a metric for how anything in our industry is a kind of a kind of reasonably good benchmark of where the money goes, because if money's being spent on ads, people are building websites, right? Like it's kind of a good way, and certainly ad spend has come back over the last few years. And but it is predicted to start to climb again over the next couple. So if you look at that maybe if kind of compound ad spend overall globally has dropped by nearly 50%, or in terms of growth number, then the market is probably a reflection of that. And so I think everyone has struggled a little bit, and hopefully over the next couple of years that that returns as quickly as possible, I would say. But I think as it's touched on, there are always some people doing better than others.
Yeah. No, but yeah, I'm sure, Nick, you've a lot of agencies struggle. The Rev Gen report that you do, that's a big.
Yeah, it's been weird. It's been lumpy for sure. 2023 was a very tough year for a lot of people, but we did a full study on how agencies grow, and I was able to segment it into 3 cohorts: fast growing ones that grew at like 34% on average year over year, middle ones that grew like 8%, and then another third grew, I think they declined a little bit. I want to say like 2 or 3%. I read the report a while ago. But I was able to find in a really rough year, a third of our survey result people were able to grow pretty substantially. Like 34% year over year growth isn't something to sneeze at when your peers are having a lot of trouble. So I think there are pockets of resiliency and pockets of growth, and that is so dependent on who you're selling to, who you're serving, what service mix you have. Do you have any kind of like real rev gen strategy, or is it like, I hope a referral comes in? Like that's a broad spectrum of capability there. So I think in general, like if I'm gonna say like what the current state is, we saw pipelines start to fill up a little bit more over the summer. It wasn't drastic, but it was like push outs started becoming, okay, yes, we'll go forward with this. Maybe not with the budget we said we would, but we are going to go forward. That has kind of puttered along. Like it's still doing it. It's still a thing. Pipelines are better than they were, but they're not great by any means. US, we just cut interest rates. I don't think you're going to see any kind of direct impact instantly from that. That's going to be multiple quarters of impact. But what that does tell me is the agencies got really lean this is a really long answer. Agencies got really lean last year in 2023. They entered 2024 on a kind of rocky pipelines, but solid cash position. So they were okay. they went through 2024 so far, doing okay and doing a little bit better than 2023. With the interest rate drops and with the continued interest rate drops and the, getting rid of the election nonsense and that distraction, brands should begin to resume spending, I would think, in the first quarter. So I'm expecting a lot of agencies to do really well first quarter, maybe second quarter next year. And 2025 should blow 2024 out of the water.
Thank you.
Long enough? I could go longer.
No. If there are no questions, yeah, I think that's all for today. And just before we leave, I'd like to announce something new and really nice. So in light of our recent integration between BugHerd and Productive, we have put together a special offer. So BugHerd is giving an exclusive offer to Productive customers where they can use BugHerd for free for a month. And the same thing goes vice versa. So BugHerd customers who decide to join Productive, you can get also a 1 month free trial of Productive. So there's that. You can find more information at the QR code. And here's a round of applause for you guys. Thank you so much to everyone who joined, your questions, and of course the recording as well as the report, and more info to come regarding the integration itself if you're a BugHerd or Productive user. I'm going to paste the email addresses of all us three in the chat right now, just in case you guys want to reach out for anything. And yeah, it was great. It was great chatting with you guys. It was great listening to you guys.
Thanks so much for having us. This was fun.
Thanks.
I always like chatting data.
Yeah. Thank you. That was great. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.